student protesters at the University of Toronto have until 6 o'clock tonight to dismantle a pro-Palestinian encampment. The deadline comes after a court-ordered injunction granted to the university yesterday. For 2 months now, encampment organizers have called for the school to cut ties with Israel and divest from companies profiting from the country's offensive in Gaza. Dale Manucdoc is at the U of T for us now. And Dale, take us through what went down yesterday and how things could play out today.
Yeah, Dwight, the court's decision came down at around 4:30 yesterday afternoon. As you mentioned, the encampment has to be cleared by 6 p.m. today. Now, that decision came after a 2-day injunction hearing on June 19th and June 20th. The justice's reasons for his decision, he cites the fundamental reason that the University of Toronto raised was use of its privately owned property and not the freedom of expression and freedom of assembly argument that the demonstrators were trying to make. I'll also note that the university tried to argue that the encampment was both violent and anti-Semitic, but was unsuccessful in doing so. Now, the justice also notes that demonstrators will have the right to continue to demonstrate at the U of T campus, but just not between the hours of 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. They also won't be able to erect any structures, tents, or fences. But I'll note, Dwight, that this fence beside me, it was erected by the University of Toronto more than 2 months ago to prevent any encampment from being set up. Now, this injunction does give Toronto Police, the OPP, and other police forces the authority to arrest and remove anybody at the encampment. U of T's president, Merrick Gertler, has confirmed that the university has sent a letter to Toronto Police requesting their assistance if the encampment isn't cleared by that 6 p.m. deadline. Anybody who fails to comply with the court's order could face some consequences under university policy or the law. Now, the police have issued their own statement. They say they will enforce the court's orders, but they're hoping that the encampment protesters leave voluntarily. Now, they won't disclose any of their operational details, so we don't know when they'll come in, how they'll come in, if they decide to speak with demonstrators first or immediately go to using any kind of force.
They said police are hoping that they leave voluntarily. So what if protesters do decide to just clear the encampment?
Yeah, so Dwight, that's a little bit up in the air. I'll tell you right now that the encampment is already partially cleared, but that's just in preparation for what might come later this evening. Upon receiving this decision yesterday, protesters began immediately removing a lot of the signage that was fixed to this fence. If you'll remember, Dwight, that there were lots of signs, lots of boards that were zip-tied to this fence that condemned Israel, condemned the University of Toronto, expressed solidarity with Palestinian people, and that's been replaced by several copies of the court's decision, which you can see over here as well. I'll also note, Dwight, that the front entrance is still being guarded by the encampment, so there's still no freedom of movement to enter or exit. That was obviously highlighted by the justice in his decision, and it might be necessary, Dwight, because we just saw somebody try and hurl a bag of garbage or a bag of recycling at the encampment protesters. So again, it might be necessary. The demonstrators have been moving out some of their larger items. Have a listen to what they had to say earlier.
Judge has ordered for us to dismantle the encampment by 6 p.m. tonight. We as a community, as students who have put our bodies on the line for over 63 days are still in dialogue and in conversation. Everything that we do, we ideally like it for it to be consensus-based. Of course, if we do not or are unable to reach consensus, we will go with whatever the majority decides to do. That being said, we are visibly removing valuables from the encampment. The police has made a statement that they will be coming in to clear us if they need to post 6 p.m. And that is why we are removing personal valuables and our larger items. That being said, a definitive decision has not been made as yet regarding dismantling the encampment. We have been engaging with the legal process throughout this injunction, and we do respect the law. That being said, our demands are something that we hold really close to us, and they are grounded in national and international law. We are holding this institution accountable.
So the encampment protesters still want their demands met. They say that the encampment was just one tactic, and there are other measures of protest that they will take. So again, Dwight, the court order says that this encampment has to be cleared by 6 p.m. Toronto Police have been called or been asked for assistance. We'll see what happens at 6 o'clock. As for whether or not the encampment protesters will leave before that deadline, again, that's still up in the air. They are deciding as a group, trying to build a consensus. So we'll see what happens at 6 o'clock.
Dale Manucdoc at the U of T encampment as the deadline approaches. Thank you, Dale.